It's January the 19th, 2022. And as I record this video, the Senate is now involved in their debate on the great so-called, they call it a voting rights bill, but it's a voting rules bill, as somebody said, and clearly a power grab attempt by the Democrats. For the moment, as predicted in my last video, it looks like Manchin and Sinema are still holding firm and on protecting the filibuster. I guess that vote will come maybe later today or maybe even tomorrow. I don't know exactly. Sometimes these things get stretched out quite a bit. They're now involved in a marathon speaking session or debating session, what you want to call it. And I guess the operative plan that the Democrats have, as far as I can tell, and I think it's a little unclear, is to push for what's called a talking filibuster, which basically means that everybody gets to have a certain, I think I just overheard today they were talking about 2 times the talk. So the idea is that there'll be a lengthy debate, but they would eventually go to simply a simple majority vote. And I guess that's similar to what was done before 1917 when they introduced the cloture concept to limit as a way to get away from extensive filibusters of people just talking hours and hours and days after days on bills, which makes the whole process a little more efficient because, well, one might argue that the government that governs best governs least. On the other hand, having these guys up there bloviating for literally weeks on end is not necessarily a good idea either when there's things that need to be done, like getting the budget passed. I mean, here we are in January, and we still haven't got the fiscal 22 budget passed yet. We're still in a continuing resolution. And of course, the thing about that is that effectively what that means is that there's a lot of inefficiencies in the money they're spending. It makes what might be otherwise inefficient even more inefficient. But so it is. So anyhow, so that's kind of what it is. The prospect at the present time is still, like I said before, that the effort will fail and the filibuster will remain because at least 2 people are going to vote against it. There are rumors that there may be other people. We're not really sure whether the Democrats have a unanimity beyond the 2, or so I guess we'll find out shortly what the outcome is. So that's kind of the state of that issue, which is a very major issue because if the filibuster goes, remember that clears the way for a lot more than just some inane voting bill. It clears the way for new states, packing courts, all kind of gun control laws, you name it. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen in that environment that won't be happening if it doesn't occur. And so that's why I've been emphasizing this ever since the beginning of my videos, almost going back to before the 2020 election on this issue, which I think is quite strategic, particularly with the Democrats in control. So anyway, if you like these videos, please subscribe, and give me a like to help out with the algorithm. You can ring the bell to get notified, and send links to people that might be interested. Appreciate that. And so that's sort of the big issue here. And I guess the final thing on that is if you happen to live in a state with a Democrat senator, give them a call their office and tell them we don't want to end the filibuster because it would create greater instability in the country. And to give you an example, remember that 2 could play at the game and almost certainly would. So if the filibuster was gone, and let's say they add the state of Puerto Rico, and then by some fluke, the Republicans got in with the filibuster gone, what they might have to do is try to break up an existing state and, shave off a piece of Oregon and make it a separate state so that, you see that they could have 2 more senators. And if you put 4 liberals on the court, bring it up to 13, the Republicans are about to respond with 4 conservatives to bring it up to 17. I mean, these are the kind of things that really could start happening, if that were to occur. You could have situations where, some kind of law was passed under one thing would put people in prison, and then the next people would come in and repeal the law and pardon everybody that would have been put in prison. for doing the same thing. You see, these are the kind of instabilities that this would lead to, given a divided country. Well, anyway, I thought I'd hit that again because that's where we are. On the COVID front, which is still kind of out there, we have more data coming in, and it's increasingly looking like the lethality of the Omicron is nowhere near its contagion. But it is creeping up a little bit. I'm still not sure that a lot of the deaths that are being recorded on a daily basis aren't from people that had Delta and were infected before Omicron took over the infections. But nevertheless, I think eventually the Omicron itself will cause fatalities, obviously, and we'll see whether they tend to drop off at some point or whether they continue to go. The actual fatality rate is going to all-time low levels on my charts. So that's one thing to consider to be a good thing here, and hopefully this phase will be over, and it may effectively give kind of a natural immunity to a lot of people that have been out there and hadn't encountered this virus before or refused the vaccine or whatever. It might help herd to kind of beat this thing down to a lower level endemic illness. And also, ultimately, it probably will evolve into a more benign illness. It'll be something more like the cold or maybe a typical flu rather than the thing it was when it first appeared on the scene. This is often the case with new viruses. They start off at a high lethal level and higher lethal level. Let's say I don't think it was ever really that high, and then starts to decline. And a lot of the misperception is also because it was first being detected when we didn't have adequate testing among elderly people in nursing homes that were dying, and so there the rate of fatality was much higher than it would be in the more active population. Okay, hey, we got that. And I guess again on other issues, the inflation continues up, and I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't noticed a whole lot where I am of empty shelves. I have seen things where there's been momentary disruptions in certain items that were, that I was used to getting, but nothing of the level of what I see in some of these pictures on TV of literally a whole rows of empty shelves. But maybe my favorite brand of orange juice is missing, but there's another brand that's available, that kind of thing. I've run into that sort of situation. But, but I guess in other places, perhaps more on the East Coast where the transportation line is longer, maybe that's where there's a bigger problem. But nevertheless, the inflation is real and it's happening everywhere. And last haircut I got, the price was up about $3. So these things occur, and it's going to go on for a while, I think. The debate is how long it goes on and what stops it. The Fed is, of course, increasing interest rates in order to fight inflation, and that's thrown the stock market a bit into a minor correction here. We don't know, it's going to go one way and another on given days, so we'll have to see how that works out. But that's another thing that will be continuing for a while. And so basically, and then the Russians are still massing troops on the Ukrainian border, and we're still kind of waiting to see what happens there. We're continuing with the diplomacy, which I think is somewhat misguided, in my own opinion, the way it's being handled. To me, I would take the Russians up on their proposition of not letting any new countries into NATO. I mean, none of them are really well positioned for us to actually defend anyhow. And we don't need to have tripwires to war everywhere in the world. And in my opinion, is that if we'd agree that they won't come into NATO, but conditioned on that Russia doesn't invade Ukraine, then maybe we could reach a deal there. And there might be other deals we could reach as well. I mean, we've got all sorts of sanctions on various Russians, and the Russians have engaged in a lot of cyber warfare against the United States. Could we kind of maybe extend this effort into negotiating a little truce on some of those fronts as well, and maybe try to improve the relationship and hopefully pivot Russia to some degree against China? What we're doing now is pushing Russia and China into a tighter and tighter alliance. And that isn't good for our interests. I mean, right now I understand China is getting involved in this Iranian nuclear negotiation on the side of the Iranians, and basically trying to frustrate our efforts to negotiate something which were pretty futile anyhow. I mean, this idea of pushing our two greatest adversaries into an alliance is not exactly a smart idea. It's better to try to break them up. and continue to poke at Russia over relatively minor issues. I mean, I don't think that Russia is going to send waves of tanks into Central Europe and take Germany and France or something. I mean, this is not the Cold War. This is a little border dispute having to do really with the situation that Russia wants access to certain seaports in the Black Sea, and there's also issues about Russian ethnics. I'm not sure how humanitarian Putin's motivations are. That may stretch credibility beyond, but it certainly is a political issue he can use at home because Russia now is kind of a quasi-corrupt democracy slash republic, whatever you want to call it, than it was the former dictatorship that used to have. He actually does have to face opponents on the ballots, unlike the old communist rulers. It's just that the election is highly rigged. And but that doesn't mean that he doesn't at some point still have to care what people think. And so if he can raise the issue of Russians being mistreated by Ukrainians, that's a political issue he can use at home. So there may be some validity in what he's doing, at least in a political context, inside the Russian political structure. So anyhow, let's hope this doesn't turn into a war or something like that, and hopefully Ukraine itself will retain its sovereignty. I'm not for Ukraine being conquered, but I'm not sure that even if this Russian, quote, invasion occurs, it really means they're planning on going all the way to Kiev and take over the entire country. It may be just a border dispute issue. And of course, those are against our current international norms. It could be a lot worse. And I think if we would negotiate in a favorable way, we might actually be able to come up with a solution that would avoid war and actually protect Ukrainian sovereignty, at least to a much greater extent than certainly, basically daring the Russians to do something. Because the sanctions we'd put on Russia would probably force Russia even closer into relationship with China, which seems to me to be exactly the opposite of what a sane geopolitical strategist would want to do at this point. Well, at any rate, I've had a bunch of issues here, kind of an update on what I'm thinking. And by the way, I also make comments on my 4 different social media accounts with the names of which are listed below on Twitter, Parler, Gab, and Gettr. So, and until next time, I'll try to keep everybody informed, and we just keep our fingers crossed that things go okay on the Senate vote here in a day or two.